Welcome to the NBA Triple Double Show powered by SportsMemo. I'm your host, Ronald Cabang from WagerTalk.com at UCapper Sports on Twitter. I'll be joined by Moneyline Matt from SportsMemo and Jeff Michaels here from WagerTalk as well. We're going to talk about Game 1 of the Heat Celtics and also a little preview to Game 2 of the Lakers and the Nuggets. Before we get into those games, though, I do want to talk about what we got going on over at SportsMemo and WagerTalk.com. Just make sure you guys head over there to the site after the show. We do have the live odds page, the free picks and analysis on a daily basis. Our cappers, our expert cappers, always have daily packages available, and we also have deals page there with any promos from any of your favorite cappers as well. So make sure you head over to the sites wagertalk.com and sportsmemo.com after the show. And before you do that as well, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button here on YouTube. It only takes a couple clicks, and it'll also help our show grow here as we move on to the final parts of the NBA season. And with that said, let's get Matt and Jeff up here with me. Guys, we'll bring those guys up here, but we do want to talk about like I said, the Heat and the Celtics Game 1, and we've seen this series happen in 2019. When I was looking into this, guys, I was looking at obviously we see an 8 seed here in the conference finals. I was looking in the database, and Jeff, I know you look at the database too from SDQL standpoint, but in the history of the database, you do not see any seeds 6 or greater in a conference finals, and it goes back to like 2002. So I actually did my own research, and the last time we seen anyone 6, 7, or 8 seed in the conference finals was in 2019 with the Knicks. But historically, this is something we haven't seen in a long time on both sides, because I think the Lakers are a 7 seed as well. So something we don't see often here, but also, before we get into breaking down the games, I always want to talk about, transparency and how the NBA is doing for us from a betting perspective. Things have been going pretty well for me. 6-1 run in the NBA playoffs so far, currently right now. And Jeff, I know you've been touching on the NBA a little bit, but mainly baseball. But how has the NBA been treating you?
Yeah, I've been selective with the plays. I do think that obviously it's a different beast here, but we've been on a
Yeah.
hot run, and hey, baseball's been going well too, so I can't complain. I'm looking forward to the conference finals, though, no question.
Yeah, Matt, I think if I remember correctly, you were on a pretty good run too, heading into Friday when we did our last
Yeah.
show. Obviously, we didn't do a show on Monday, but how's everything going with you?
Yeah, everything's been going well. We had another winning weekend. Actually, our first losing day was yesterday, and we went 1-1-1. So lost maybe like
Mm.
0.2 of a unit, something along those lines. I was one of those who actually got the Lakers at the +6 and not the 6.5. I did not think it was going to go up anymore, so I took it at the 6. And it ended up
Yeah.
getting me. So it'd be like that sometimes. But, we got another great playoff game today, ready to break it down with you guys. Already got a couple plays loaded, so ready to roll.
All right, well, let's get into this game 1 here. Obviously, the Knicks and the Heat, like I mentioned, sorry, not the Heat and the Celtics here, like I mentioned. What I was talking about earlier with the Knicks being an A seed in 1998-99. Last time we seen an A seed in the conference finals, but here we see the 5th seed Heat versus the Celtics here. This is the same matchup, guys, we saw in the bubble in 2019. We got some of the key players from the same series as well. We got, four of them. Sorry.
All four
Jeff,
teams,
say that one more time.
Western
14.
Conference,
Yeah, all four.
Western
Yeah,
Conference
exactly.
too.
Exactly. And so the other thing to mention, a lot of the same players in the matchups, right? We got Tatum, Brown, Smart, even some of the other guys like Grant Williams and stuff on the Celtics. And on the Heat side, majority you're gonna think about Butler and Bam. And Bam had a really great series in the bubble in that conference final. So it's gonna be interesting to see how this matchup goes. But historically, guys, Coach Spo has been a strong game 1 coach, in the Eastern Conference, specifically within the conference, not including the NBA Finals, but since 2019, outside of the NBA Finals, that means within the conference, Heat are 8-1 straight up, 9-0 against the spread in game 1s of a series. That's a very strong trend there, and it just shows how strong Spo is as a coach going into these these game ones. You know, the adjustments they go from team to team. But what are your thoughts on this one from a betting aspect, Matt? Do you see any advantage from a betting perspective, total side, maybe a prop?
I really like your point there, Ron, about the Miami Heat. If I were to go anywhere, I've been kind of flirting with the Miami Heat all day. Haven't made that jump just yet. But for me, you guys have heard me talk about this throughout the playoffs. Anytime I see like above 5 points in the playoffs, like that's just a lot of points for two teams that are incredibly familiar with each other. Ron brought up a great point with Eric Spoelstra, who is one of the best coaches throughout the NBA, if not the best coach in the NBA. In the series, however, I definitely do give the advantage to the Boston Celtics. This is a Miami Heat team that is without Tyler Herro. They're without Victor Oladipo. And they're relying very much so on guys like Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Kyle Lowry. And it definitely makes things a little bit tougher when you're going against a team like the Boston Celtics, who, in terms of depth, in terms of scoring ability, is far greater than that of the Atlanta Hawks. And they're far greater than that of the New York Knicks, that's for sure. And especially with Jason Tatum coming off the 51-point game, Jaylen Brown shooting at around a 50% clip throughout the playoffs. And then it's not just that, it's the matchups from this series that I like as well. You take a look at Malcolm Brogdon. Malcolm Brogdon has been playing great off the bench. Someone like Derek White, he's a solid scorer, maybe a 10-point per game guy, but more or less his defense is very good, and it's going to be something that is essential going against Jimmy Butler. And then one other thing that I haven't thought about is the fact that if they struggle at all with Jimmy Butler in this series, you have Grant Williams coming off the bench. So you could bring him into the starting lineup just to man up against Jimmy Butler. So for me, it is tough to see this going further than 5 games, even though they have Eric Spoelstra, even though the Miami Heat have upset 2 teams in a row, 2 rounds in a row. But for me, I definitely would be looking at the Boston Celtics, and I would be looking at it in 5 games. In this spot, however, I do like the Miami Heat plus the 8 points. Another spot that I'm looking is the total. I do think this is a little bit low for a total. This is a Boston Celtics team that averages 119 points per game at home. And, this Miami Heat team, yes, they're going to slow things down, but there are a lot of mismatches on the court when you're putting these two teams against each other. Kevin Love running the floor is going to be going against potentially Jason Tatum. So they're probably I wouldn't be surprised if Miami came out in a zone in this game, actually. But regardless, I think my favorite look in this game is going to be the total. I think the Boston Celtics are coming off a game where, they clicked a little bit. They saw Jason Tatum get going very well. These two teams are very familiar with each other. So I do like the over in this spot. And I also have a best bet from this game that we'll talk about in a little bit.
Sorry about that, guys. But Matt, you mentioned the Heat possibly looking into this, you covering this game here. So far in the NBA playoffs, there's only been 6 games where the team that won didn't cover the spread. And one of those games yesterday, they ended up covering the open line, but not the closing line. So it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of these games go. The later that we go in the playoffs, like, is that trend going to stay true where you just got to think about who's going to win and they're going to cover the game. But Jeff, that kind of brings me to you here. I know you touched on SDQL a lot, and you probably brought up a lot of points here in this series specifically. But what do you think about that holding true for the rest of the playoffs? Like, do you think it's just something that's going to continue to go in that direction as far as the team winning, covering for the most part?
I don't. I mean, I actually find that really interesting because Matt made the point that, jumping on teams that the line's more than 5 points or whatever it may be. But, we're seeing some bigger lines here. So it is kind of shocking to me almost that the teams are winning and winning by this big of margin, especially when one of the things that I've been mentioning is these teams playing with a chip on their shoulder and playing from behind. I will say that it could be a point to yours that a lot of underdogs are obviously winning these games. We got Miami that has obviously upset 2 straight series. The Lakers have kind of upset 2 straight series. I think there were games that we thought that they would win there, but those underdogs are winning these games. So obviously if an underdog wins straight up, they are going to cover the spread. But I do think that this is the point that it kind of changes. Although maybe not game one. I'm looking Miami here. If Boston pulls it out, I don't think that they're able to cover the spread. I think this is going to be a closer game. And yeah, a couple of the trends, you alluded to it, Ron. But how about this one? Game seven, or excuse me, coming off a game seven, and you got the rest disadvantage like Boston does here. 19 and 33 straight up in game one. They're just 20, 31 and 1 against the spread. So, team like Boston that was forced to go 7 games, now playing with the rest disadvantage, doesn't matter what seed they are, doesn't hold well in game one there. And, it stood out to me too. I looked at the head to head records. Miami's won and covered back-to-back games against Boston coming into this series, and in the last 3 years, they're actually 6-3 straight up and against the spread playing at TD Gardens in Boston. So they have the edge there, despite Boston having the head-to-head edge in the last 3 years. So, Miami's done well on their court. And one other thing that amazed me, this is the first time since March that Miami has failed to cover back-to-back games. So they didn't cover the final 2 games against the Knicks. They never lost more than one in a row against the spread all the way through April and this far into March, or into May, excuse me. And 4 of their games against the Knicks, they shot under 42.5% for the Heat. And they still managed to win 3 of those games straight up. So, I do think that there's something to be said about Miami playing with a chip on their shoulder. And I think there's something to be said about them being able to get the job done despite the opposing defenses being able to slow down their offense too. So, in that situation, I just think 8 points is too much to lay against Miami. So I like Miami tonight plus those points.
I agree with both of you guys here as far as it being the Heat being the side. But one thing that I want to ask you, Jeff, let's go to you real quick. Obviously, these two teams faced each other in 2019, right? The Heat were the 5 seed. They're a 5 seed. They're the lower seed again in this matchup. Do you think that some of these guys, Tatum, Brown, Smart, Grant Williams, those guys who were there in that series, remember that and kind of take it personally going into this series, and that kind of affects how they come into it as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's huge too. I was going to bring this up a little bit later in the Western Conference aspect, but I think it's huge now to as almost as a bounce back because, everybody's put an asterisk on that COVID season. Was it a real championship? Was it a real tournament? Was the competition the same as it is without fans playing in the bubble? Blah, 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 blah. And, I do think that this points a lot towards LeBron, but I think that there's something to prove that Miami especially beat them in that year in the bubble. And I think that they want to show that it wasn't a fluke, that it was just as tough, just as convincing, and they can do it again outside the bubble. So I do definitely think that it adds a different, level of competition and a different aspect to the thought processes of the teams, mainly I think Miami and the Lakers who are looking to prove that season wasn't a fluke.
Yeah. Matt, I want to come to you real quick. One more question on this game before we move on to the next one. But I want to ask you about Bam Adebayo because I know you like you look at matchups a lot differently, especially player versus player. But Bam had really good success in that bubble series against Boston in 2019. And then obviously the Boston, matched up with Joel Embiid, and we saw how that series went. Do you think there's anything different now for Boston than in 2019 that they could limit Bam from making a big impact?
I do think there's some difference here. It's still Robert Williams. It's still Al Horford. Joe Mazzulla is a new coach there as well. So you might have some different defensive schemes and things of that nature. But if I'm being honest, if I'm the Boston Celtics, I would probably be playing Bam straight up. I'd probably be playing Jimmy Butler straight up and maybe mixing you got to kind of surprise them. You can't run doubles the entire game. You have to kind of send traps when you feel like momentum might be shifting, things like that. And I'm just going to take my chances with guys like Max Strus and Gabe Vincent, because at some point, I think these guys are going to have those cold games. And me personally, I would trust the Boston Celtics secondary players more so than those guys. So I do think Bam can continue to have success against the Boston Celtics. I do think Jimmy Butler is going to find success as well, because I do think that Joe Mazzulla trusts his players enough to, for the most part, play them one-on-one. If it starts to get out of hand, then I think they'll make some changes and things like that. But yeah, for the most part, I don't expect that many changes. I don't expect them to go throwing doubles at Bam Adebayo all that much, because another thing with Bam is he is a fairly solid facilitator. If you go and throw doubles at him, you have cutters to the basket, things of that nature, Bam can have success there. So that's why things with points, rebounds, assists, stuff like that with Bam Adebayo are generally good looks, because he is a very versatile player. He can do a lot of things very well. And then early on, too, if you see that mid-range jumper going down a couple times, that's generally a good sign that Bam is going to have a good day. And me personally, like if I'm watching a game, I will live bet some of those point props basically just off of how I know those players go. You know, if there's some players where if they miss 2 or 3, it ain't going to go good. If there's some players, if they make 2 or 3 early on, it's going to be a hot night for them. And that's Bam Adebayo typically.
I like it. All right, well, let's move on to the next game here. Obviously, we had game 1 of the Lakers and the Nuggets yesterday. Amazing game. Nuggets dominated the first half. The Lakers made the proper adjustments to fight back in the second half. Just, obviously it wasn't enough to get it done, but they were really close to actually coming back from a 21-point deficit to get the dub. But the one thing that's crazy to me, guys, and I want to get your take on this too, is during the game, I heard the commentators, especially in the fourth quarter, talk a lot about the Lakers' defensive adjustments after the break, but they still allowed the Nuggets to score 60 points. I think the bigger adjustment that they made was on the offensive side of the ball. You can definitely see that they felt a little bit more comfortable. They scored 72 points in the second half there. I want to get your guys' take on it as far as game 2, but the adjustments made after the break, obviously the Nuggets can't feel comfortable. They're gonna have to make some changes themselves, right? What is your Matt? Let's go to you first. What is your take on game 2 here after what we saw in game 1?
Yeah, for game 2, I'm 100% going to be on the Lakers. There's no doubt there. I was on Lakers in game 1. I'm definitely going to be on it in game 2. And with the NBA playoffs, and I think a lot of my success have come from this and in years past, I very much go off of the zigzag theory. And basically the zigzag theory in the playoffs is, kind of just going back and forth. Game 1, the Nuggets win that, then the next one I'll follow with the Lakers. Or, one series, it might go down 0-2, and then it'll get tied up 2-2. So, and that's one thing with the playoffs, and we were kind of talking about this before the show. After one game, you cannot panic. Don't panic your series bets. Don't panic those alternate series game bets, stuff like that, because 7 games is a long time. Not saying this is 100% going to go 7 games, but these two teams definitely have the capacity to go 7 games. They're very even. They're both very skillful. But for me, what I took away from game 1 was definitely how well the Nuggets played on offense. I felt like that was one of the best games I've ever seen the Nuggets play offensively. It just seemed like anything that was going up was going down. There were 3 circus shots that I saw with Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, and Michael Porter Jr. that equated to 9 points. And this Nuggets team won by 6 points. So for me, if I'm the Lakers and I go to that locker room, yeah, sure, it sucks that you lost the game, but it's tough not to take away some positives from that, or it's tough not to feel like going into game 2, you have a lot of momentum and maybe even taking it as a win that was a loss, because I do think they figured a lot out there, and it's rare that you see Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Bruce Brown. Throw Bruce Brown in there. All 5 of them had incredibly good games, like top-level games, making 3-pointers that were just off balance, fading away, just crazy stuff. And for the Lakers, I felt like they just kept chipping away, playing their game. I felt like the Lakers style of basketball is more consistent than that of the Denver Nuggets. And once again, I do think this is going to be a series that goes 6 or 7 games, but I would not panic whatsoever. I would definitely be looking at the Lakers game 2 right now. That's the spread is 5.5. I will probably be jumping on that, even though I'm a little scared because I took that 6 and went up to 6.5. So I'm almost wondering if people are going to be on the Nuggets again. But after what I saw, I feel like a lot of people will be on the Lakers with those defensive adjustments. And we've talked about on the show, Ron, I'm very impressed with how Darvin Ham has coached. He's going to go with the best lineup that gives them the chance to win. So I do trust the Lakers. I trust Darvin Ham, LeBron, AD, all those guys in the spot. But hopefully this series just keeps up like game 1. That was unreal.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about sticking with guys who are doing well. Rui was a guy that ended up closing out that game, with Shooter and those guys. But Rui is definitely a key contributor in this series, and how he defended Jokic to close the game, I think was pretty solid. But like I said, I feel like it's the offensive adjustments that they made that was really the game changer in how they came back. Not only being able to distribute the way that they did, but also guys knocking down the shots that weren't going in the first half as well. So it's going to be interesting to see the Lakers. After a loss in the playoffs in this season, in this playoffs, 4-0 straight up and against the spread. It's something that they have done so far in the playoffs really well is making the proper adjustments from game to game, especially after a loss. But on the opposite side, the Nuggets continue to dominate offensively at home, 7-0 straight up, 5-2 against the spread at home in the playoffs this season. They failed to cover, like I said earlier, they failed to cover the closing line for game 1, but they did cover game 1, the opening line. Jeff, what are your thoughts on this game 2 between these two teams here who really have two trends backing them, right? How do you go about that? Because I know you're a big trend guy too.
Yeah, one of the things that I, at least personally, I don't do a whole lot of trends in with is first half, first quarter bets, but I think that's where I'm headed for this one because you guys kind of touched on a lot of things that I was going to say, but from the defensive aspect, I think that the Lakers' biggest change was Rui that Ron you alluded to was Rui defending against the Joker at the end of the game and watching AD be able to help. I mean, he block, steal, whatever it was. The announcers called it an alley-oop from Joker. I thought it was a shot attempt, but that help defense in the paint from AD was definitely game changing, I think, in the second half. But to Matt's point too, it shows you right there in one game. I think it shows you not to stress about your season or the series bets because first half and second half, we could have called them game 1 and game 2 because they were, completely opposite. I mean, Denver led at the end of the first half, Denver led by 18. If you take that out, the end of the second half, the Lakers would have been leading by 12. So that's still a double digit lead, at quote unquote halftime, if we count the second half as a different game, and negate the first half. So, there's never LeBron, especially, unfortunately, I know from one side or the other, but is a guy you're never going to want to count out. Whether it be series, whether it be game, whether it be just down in the fourth quarter, there's always a way for this team to come back and to fight. And I do think that it's interesting because obviously the lower seeds, we talked about it with Miami. We don't see it very often. So Miami and the Lakers are getting a lot of talk, but I swear there is more LA Lakers winning the championship discussions than there is Denver Nuggets winning the championship discussions. And I think that that's huge. Everybody's looking at what LeBron and what this team can do and the changes that LA made at the trade deadline. And they were all smart. Don't get me wrong. Rui has been a huge impact along with those other guys. But I mean, Denver has pretty much been beginning to end the 1 seed or pretty dang close to the 1 seed up there in the West from the beginning of the season. I wouldn't count LeBron out in this one. I do think bouncing back off a loss, I'm probably going to be taking the dog plus the points here. But I do think that this is Denver's series to win in the long run because they don't have the pressure that a normal 1 seed does, in my opinion. Especially you think about it should be a walk in the park taking on the 7 seed. but everybody's still talking about the 7 seed and how what they can do to bounce back and what they can do to bounce. How about Denver led LeBron and AD by 21 points in this game? That's hard to
Mhm.
forget. I do think the Lakers carry their momentum from the second half, which is why I would be looking at a first half here. I think that the Lakers start the game out hot. And then I do think that we're going to see a lot of games in this series that are the tale of two halves.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that the Lakers are going to be the one to come out in the first half of every game, or Denver for that matter. But I do think that it's going to be a minimal amount of times that we see one of these teams lead at halftime and also finish the game ahead. So I do think it'll be an exciting series. I like the Lakers in this one behind that zigzag kind of mentality, and we'll see what happens if they can pull out and tie this series. It's a completely different series headed back to LA for game 3.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like this series isn't going to go 7 games as well. I mean, both of these teams, they said they protect home court really well. And that's the reason why I like it to go 7. Obviously, game sevens are always unpredictable. The defense shows up. The pace of play is a lot different as well. So it's hard to predict who would win game 7, especially even if it's in Denver. For the most part, but I definitely agree as far as this going 7 games. The other thing to mention too, and I talked about this on my show, Let's Cap, is between AD and Jokic, I expected neither of them to be able to stop each other, and sure enough, that's ending up what happened is both guys did really well yesterday. What AD 40 points, 10 rebounds. Jokic pretty much had a triple double near halftime. I think he had like 12 rebounds in the first quarter. Like he just went off, and I think that's going to continue throughout throughout the series. I know. Rui did a pretty good job to close the game, the fourth quarter. But at the same time, Jokic's IQ is just off the charts, and I expect him to make adjustments if they continue to do the same thing with Rui. But with that said, man, I'm really excited to see what happens in game 2. I'm not really sure where I want to go with it yet, but like I said, a lot of the trends are supporting both of these guys. Nuggets at home, Lakers off of a loss, so we'll see what happens. But I'm not completely sure where I want to go with that game. Maybe stick with a team total somewhere because I know the Nuggets, no matter what, they're going to be able to do what they do on the offensive side of the ball. All right, with that said, guys, it's time for the best bet of the show. Let's go with Jeff here first. What's your best bet for today, and what do you got going on the premium side over at Wager Talk?
Yeah, best bet. I was real interested in what Matt was going to say when you asked him that Bam Adebayo question because I'm headed to Bam tonight for best bet. His PRA number is 29.5. And I think that the one big difference between what we saw, that COVID year between these two teams, kind of alluding to what you asked Matt earlier, is the age difference solely in Al Horford. I know that 25-year-old turning 27, isn't going to make as big of a difference, but Al Horford's averaging almost 6 minutes less per game than he was in that series that they played last time. He's getting older, but he's still their biggest body. And I think Bam, has shown that he's not a one-level player. I mean, he's put up double-digit points in every playoff game, and he's had the advantage on the boards thus far. He's had 8+ boards in all but one playoff game so far on this run. And he even managed to piece together a triple-double with 10 assists in the postseason, which isn't something that, we've seen some assists from Adebayo, but triple-double isn't something we're always looking at there. But he's kind of shown his ability here to be versatile. And obviously we know he's capable of rebounding. And so is Boston. But I do think that Adebayo has a little bit of an advantage here. I mean, I like Robert Williams. I like Grant Williams. But they don't have, the size presence that you normally see out of those normal 4s and 5 position guys there. And Adebayo, stands a whole head taller than them. He's been able to get it done in the scoring aspect, putting up 23, 24, 25 points a game in some scenarios here in the playoffs, and grabbing 8, 9, 10 rebounds as well, plus that little backup option there, the assists that he's capable of. because if Boston really does shut him down, he will pass it out. And I think that the one major difference between what we saw in Philly last time is Embiid this year has been Philly's number one scorer. You know, there's other guys you got to look at. You got to look at Harden. You got to look at Maxey. I know there's other weapons on that team, but a lot of the emphasis on this Miami offense isn't going to be solely centered around Adebayo. And I think a lot of the focus is going to be shutting down those smaller 3-point guards and shutting down Jimmy Butler. And I do think that there's an ability here in game one for Adebayo to almost be forgotten about. Plus, when you throw in PRAs, you got 3 different ways to score, basically. So I like Adebayo hitting at least 30 here tonight and going over this 29.5 PRA number.
I like it, and another thing to mention, what Matt brought up as well is his ability to distribute the ball when needed as well. So that might be something that's an added bonus for you to get that PRA to go over. Let's go to Matt here. What is your best bet for today, and what do you got going on over at SportsMemo?
Yeah, over at SportsMemo right now, I have about 3 plays loaded for the Heat and Celtics game, and I have about 4 series futures for both the Lakers and Nuggets series, and then, of course, the Heat and Celtics series to go with that. But for today we're going to be looking at Jason Tatum, and we're going to be looking at his rebounds. Jason Tatum has been one of the best rebounders on the Boston Celtics, actually the best rebounder on the Boston Celtics at this point in time. And through the playoffs, he actually has a 15.2% chance to get every rebound that is available. The only player that actually has a higher percentage than him is Robert Williams, but there's a huge difference between Jason Tatum and Robert Williams. Jason Tatum is playing around 40 minutes per game. Robert Williams is playing around 21 minutes per game. So because of that, that means a lot of those rebound opportunities are going to be going to Jason Tatum. Now, in addition to that, you also have to take a look at the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat in the regular season were dead last in points per game, averaging 108 points per game on the road. So you can definitely expect missed shots. And when there are those missed shots, and probably more than typical, more than maybe the 76ers or who the Hawks, whatever, I believe Jason Tatum is going to be just as aggressive. He's actually gotten more aggressive as the playoffs have gone on. In the first series, he averaged 10 rebounds per game over this line. In the second series against the 76ers, he averaged 11.1 rebounds per game. So once again, just a very good spot for Jason Tatum. And then one thing that I don't think a lot of people are thinking of is the mismatch with Jason Tatum, who's going to be most likely running that 4 position and going against Kevin Love, or the Heat are going to be forced to mix up that starting lineup. And if in fact he is going against Kevin Love, it's just an athleticism mismatch. You know, K Love is more of a typical big body box out type guy. He's not going to be used to someone like Jason Tatum, who's coming in off the 3-point line to jump in, try and get those putbacks like he typically does, just crashing the boards and getting those offensive rebounds. So I do think that's a big mismatch. If in fact they sub that out, then he's going to be going against Caleb Martin. So that's another mismatch in my eyes. So for me personally, going back to what I said earlier, I would not be shocked at all if the Heat do run a mix of a zone in this series pretty frequently, just because of Jason Tatum running that 4, Kevin Love out there. It's a speed mismatch, athleticism, like I was saying. So I do think that gives Tatum more of an ability to attack the boards. And then kind of similar to what LeBron does as well, or what LeBron typically used to do more often, was the team would allow him to get the rebound. It's not like everyone is going for it. They allow him to get the rebound because then he gets the ball and he immediately pushes it up court. You don't have to pass it to him. You don't have to run screens to get him the basketball. He's already got it. He's bringing it up. You're getting into your motion. You're getting into your action, and you're running your plays. So for me, I think it's Jason Tatum all day. I think he's going to have another over 10 rebound game here, obviously a double-double. I actually think Jason Tatum is going to be the top rebounder in this series on top of that. So for me, it's Jason Tatum over 9.5 rebounds tonight.
I like it. One thing to mention as well, Jason Tatum has been an underrated rebounder pretty much all season long. I think he's probably hit that over a lot when you mentioned him on the show during the regular season too. So I like how you go back to him here in this spot here. For me, I like the Heat team total to go over 101.5. One thing to mention here, the Heat 9-4 on their team total over so far in the playoffs, but that includes 5-0-1 on their team total over when they play on the road. So unexpectedly, they're getting it done offensively on the road. For the most part, they've stayed under. They stayed over this 101.5 in every single game except for one, which was the closeout game versus the Knicks. But we talked about it in the show specifically. Those game 6, game 7 closeout games typically are very low scoring, so that was sort of expected. I think I'm pretty sure I was on the under in that game, anyways. But that was the only game that they stayed under this 101.5 team total. From the Celtics perspective, they are in a similar situation as they were in game one of the series versus Philly, where they were the home favorite and they were also the more rested team. Celtics ended up losing that game outright and allowing the Sixers to go over their team total by 16 points. In this situation here, I do look towards the Heat to cover the game. I'm not sure they win this game outright, but for the most part, I think offensively they're going to do enough to get over that 101.5 team total point mark. So that's what my best bet for today's show is. From a premium side, that is actually a premium play. And that's what's on wagertalk.com right now. So if you're watching the show, don't go to the site and buy it. I just gave it to you for free. And also, I do have one MLB play as well that's posted, and that's going to be around the afternoon time. So it's one of the early games. So that's what I got going on over at wagertalk.com. With that said, guys, that is the end of the show. We did talk about, obviously game one here of the Heat and the Celtics. We also gave a little preview of the Lakers and Nuggets game 2. So with that said, our next show will be on Friday. We have Tony Finn, I think, with us, myself, and Moneyline Matt. Till then, guys, good luck with all your action. Peace.